Hey everybody, welcome to Book Reviews Kill. My name is Evan, and this is an interview with Travis Baldree. You might know him as the narrator for such works as the Cradle series by Will White. We'll get into all the accolades and stuff like that, but what's important is that we're talking about mostly Legends and Lattes, which is a book I read like a month ago, and I absolutely loved it. A lot of people loved it. So many people loved it, in fact, that Travis signed a deal with Tor Books. And this is an independent book, right? This was written 5 months ago. And it's just so awesome. You can kind of hear the excitement between both of us. Like, I'm really happy for him, and he's really kind of overwhelmed with everything that's been going on. And I really loved sitting down with him, and we ramble. This is why I kind of started off with this happy little content warning for you. We went over video games. We went over the state of fantasy today. We're going over everything. So, obviously this is a book podcast. I want to stress that. And we do talk about books, but we are also talking about everything under the sun that has to do with fantasy and science fiction and everything like that. So, I really hope that you enjoy this episode. I certainly had a blast making it, and I can't wait to have Travis back on. And if you haven't, go buy Legends and Lattes and read it in a cozy spot next to a window while it's raining. It is just the best. Without further ado, here is my interview with author and audiobook narrator Travis Baldree. Hello and welcome to Book Reviews Kill, a podcast about fantasy, science fiction, and horror novels. I'm Evan, and today I'm sitting down with Travis Baldree, author of Legends and Lattes, co-owner and CEO of Double Damage Games, creator of Torchlight, Fate, and Rebel Galaxy, and narrator of such acclaimed works as Will White's Cradle series, Kyle Kieran's Slade Singer, and AFK's Divine Apostasy series. Wow, you are busy, Travis.
It really sounds like that when you put it together that way.
Does it feel like it?
I mean, I definitely feel busy, but that feels more like the past 20 years busy. So just like kind of all compressed into a single space.
All of your accolades. It's really, really nice to have you on here. I read Legends and Lattes a few weeks ago, and I have this ridiculously long to-be-read pile, the TBR pile. It's like 90 books or something. But every now and then, there's just like this weird kind of process on social media where a book just keeps getting brought up over and over and over again. And I kept seeing Legends and Lattes, and I loved the cover. I loved the tagline, like a novel of high fantasy and low stakes. I loved that so much. And I think it was just something that I was looking for. I mean, I feel like a lot of fantasy, I don't know if you agree with this, but a decent amount of it seems to be really intense, and not in a bad way.
Yes, it is. I mean, I like that, but
yeah,
the stakes are so often like world-spanning, universe-spanning stakes. The end of civilization is nigh, or whatever.
Yeah, it's just death.
Yeah, there's a lot of grimdark, which I like. Abercrombie's amazing.
Oh, of course. Abercrombie's amazing. You've got like Mark Lawrence is out there doing his thing. I mean, George R. R. Martin had a lot to do. I think Robin Hobb even.
Yeah, that's a different kind of brutality for me. It's more like Robin Hobb's ghostly hand enters my chest and just squeezes my heart over and over and over again, and somehow I still want that.
She seems like the sweetest person in the world, and this, like, how could you do this to Fitz?
How could you do this? It's brutal.
Yeah, I mean, it was just such it's cliche almost at this point, but it's just such a breath of fresh air to read something that I was emotionally invested in, but didn't bum me out.
I'm glad.
I'm really, really happy to have read it, and I was sad to see there wasn't more, but I think that's kind of.
I'll try to rectify that.
It's like the cool thing about reading things that you like is the feeling of wanting more is always a good thing too.
Yeah, I agree. I like that I got to at least finish a story and that I didn't decide I was just going to tee up a 3-book series and leave some kind of cliffhanger.
Is that something that you feel like the industry kind of like pressures people to do at all? Like just to write these series?
I don't know. From the outside, I don't feel like I'm really like in the industry. I feel like I'm an accidental author. So there are probably pressures that are applied to them that I'm just not aware of. It certainly seems like everybody wants to write a series, and I can't decide if that's from the author's perspective. They want to tell really big stories that keep people coming back for additional volumes. They just have to tell something at that scale, or if there is, some sort of publisher pressure. When I was talking to Tor, they seemed pleased with the fact that my sequel did not have to be a direct connection. It didn't have to be that it wasn't a direct story follow-on that would require you to buy the previous book. And that makes sense to me because it feels like with most series, the deeper in you get, the more and more you shed readers, right? So as a publisher, they have to be aware of this.
Yeah, I think maybe having something where it's I guess serialized, you could say, but not necessarily like this continuous story where it's like we could go back to the world, right? But we don't necessarily have to. I think that's like the cool middle ground. Like I know like
that's what I want.
Yeah, like E.M. Banks does that with like the Culture series, like Ursula Le Guin's Hainish cycle does that.
Discworld is that for me. It's just a ton of standalone stories that are in a world that just like gets richer the more of the stories you read, but you can start anywhere, really.
Yeah, I mean, Discworld is really cool because you've got like the little series, like it's kind of like it's almost like you can read like 4 books that are kind of this in the same.
Yeah,
but they really
they'll follow like the same characters. I mean, here's our Vimes group of books, and here's Nanny Ogg is in these, and this one's more about the university. But you can still kind of just pop out. You can just say, oh, that was still felt like I got an end.
Yeah, Terry Pratchett was the master. He's my palate cleanser.
He's great.
I've got a few questions here for you. I wanted to ask, do you think that your work on various video games helped with like your creative approach to writing? Like in writing like this novel specifically, and maybe your approach to writing more?
Probably to some extent, but it probably had more to do with how I work than anything else, because that's a lot of kind of like self-motivated work. I mean, I say that. I tried to write a novel a whole bunch of times, and I failed abjectly every time. So, maybe it didn't help that much. I actually think I got a lot more out of audiobook reading as far as writing.
Interesting.
I'm sure I took something just from the basic brute force of sitting down and doing work that isn't always pleasant.
Right.
to get to the end of a project. I really enjoy reading audiobooks. It's actually really great and really fulfilling to do because you're getting to read a story and you're kind of getting sort of your best version of that story. You're squeezing out everything from everything. You never skim, right? You're just getting the full version of the story. So it's actually really cool. I think most of the problem people have when they're narrating is just the general problem of putting their butt in the chair because you're working at home and there's snacks like right over there. So for me, what I do is I work live on Discord most of the time. So I have an audience that's there and that hangs out while I work, and it's like having an office, and it makes me embarrassed if I leave to go eat snacks. So I work pretty regular hours, which is nice. So I like that a lot. I think as far as useful stuff from audiobook narration when I'm writing, it's obviously you have to like books and you have to like writing to want to read audiobooks out loud. I feel like that's a prerequisite. You have to like language and like characters and like stories, which, you're already at least off to a good start. But one of the really cool things about it is that you're reading a bunch of other people's work. And again, you're not skimming. You have to appreciate and take into account everything that's being said and everything the author's trying to do. And you're often getting a really good sense of what they're attempting. And you're like, are they succeeding or are they not? Am I getting out and pushing here a little bit to help them get what it's clear they're trying to achieve? Or is this just totally effortless and I can't believe how great this is? Am I really bogged down now because we've been talking about the rugs for the past 8 pages? Or, is it really flowing? So you're making all these observations that I think accumulate and help you kind of refine your own approach to writing. Not necessarily good or bad, but like you really refine your own taste specifically and what you want to write and read, because you just got this really fast loop of iteration in going through a lot of different approaches to solving the same problems.
You're engaging with it.
You're engaging with it in a way that you don't when you're just sitting down and reading it to yourself for pleasure, because you omit things you don't care about when you read for pleasure. It's like when people say that when you're editing your work, you should read it aloud to yourself and all of these things will be exposed that you don't otherwise notice. Well, that's basically happening for a narrator all the time, every day, for hundreds of books. So it's like this incredibly fast churn of learning.
Wow.
At least about what you yourself want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you were able to really get a good feel for the rhythm of these kinds of dialogue and of just like narration and description and how, maybe when you're narrating, you're like, then like we've been talking about this hillside for a whole page. Like
Quite some
that's a
time.
long time. I mean, and do it if you want to, obviously, but
And a sentence that's hard to articulate out loud is, I think, also hard to articulate in your brain. Like things that don't stick or that you can't find your way to the end of the sentence, you get lost in the middle. That happens to you at an even greater degree when you have to say it out loud. So you start to recognize things about like the construction of a sentence or how you fold it in next to dialogue or how you handle your attribution and make it easier or harder for you to comprehend just at a very basic level, at least for me to comprehend, me as the narrator. But I think a lot of that's universal. It's just really, and it's like having a class all the time on how stories and how prose works. It's really cool.
wow, yeah, I think you might be a pretty special case as far as I live and breathe this stuff. I'm reading and writing and making content about books all the time, and I don't know of many audiobook narrators that have gone on and written their own stuff.
There's a few I can think of. Julia Whalen, I know, does. She's got a new book coming out, I think. Eric Jason Martin. I know there are a few. And obviously there are authors who narrate their own work too. But the other direction is probably definitely rarer. Which is kind of a little funny. It feels like there should be more authors who are narrators because, they like books.
There's like this, and you can confirm whether or not this is true, but I think the general kind of idea of audiobook narration seems to be that it's really tedious.
I don't find it tedious. I mean, if it's tedious to you while you're doing it, I think that probably comes out in how you're performing it. There are certainly books that I like and love, and then there are books that I read that I don't like and love. That definitely happens. And usually with the ones that are harder that way, the challenge is you got to find your way in. You find something, you find out what the author loves, you try and connect to what the audience is going to love. They're writing this for somebody. And who is that person and what do they want out of this? And if you can connect to that in some way, then you kind of like, it's like suspending your disbelief a little bit. You're just doing it on behalf of someone else. If I could read every book that I love out loud to myself instead of in my head, I would do it. Because the actual act of doing it is, I get so much more out of the book. If I had infinite time, that's what I would do.
Do you find yourself doing that at all, like unconsciously?
I mean, when I'm writing, I'm kind of narrating in my head. I'm still a really fast reader when I read on the page. I don't slow down the way I should. So the nice thing about audiobook narration is it makes me slow down and appreciate things that I might otherwise not get. Like, it's like I'm only getting like 50 or 60% of it. It's like, but when I have to read it out loud, you turn it all the way up to 10. I get everything.
Yeah, I kind of do that sometimes when I'm reading. I'll read like the first and last paragraph of sentence of a paragraph kind of simultaneously, and I'm like, okay, they're like walking out the door, and then
yeah, they're doing something I don't care about. But there's stuff in there that I should have,
yeah,
that really was meaningful, but I'm just being lazy. So I'm just not allowed to be lazy. So it's nice.
I'm curious about your mentality going into write. Do you prefer to outline or just kind of like see where the story goes, or a little bit of both? I mean, was Legends and Lattes like heavily outlined at all?
It was outlined. Every other time I tried to do a National Novel Writing Month novel, I tried to pants it, and I always failed in the middle. So this is the first one I outlined, and that worked. And now I'm just going to do that forever. When I outlined, I kind of narratively wrote out the story. So like in just plain, and it's not like bullet points. Like I just kind of like, it's like a condensed narrative write out of this story that's like, a couple pages long or whatever. Fortunately, this book was really simple.
It was, but it was also like, you're not just telling the story of, and I'm not trying to like explain your own book to you, but like you're not. It's not that you were just saying Orc wants a simple life, coffee.
Yeah,
she's still growing and learning along the way, and like filing that down and like having it fit. And it's like you can't have a story like literally with zero conflict in it.
No, it's just how can I make this? It's like almost like a puzzle. Like how can I make this work with conflict that's not what I would traditionally expect, given these characters and this world.
Right. Because I mean, you could have written it as like they're gonna kill her whole family, or like
yeah,
or they're gonna use her as some kind of like instrument to bring about the end of the world if she doesn't.
There's a sword fight somewhere in the middle,
right. Yeah, and I like how you have like there's like this kind of threat of not even really violence against, and I'll try not to spoil anything, but not even really violence against the main character as a person, or their bodily, but just what they care about.
Yeah, it's a threat to their plans or their intent or their hopes or whatever.
So the main character in Legends and Lattes, Viv, if I'm pronouncing that right, not
Yep.
Vive, is seeking a quiet life after years of combat and rough travel. Did you kind of relate to that in some way going in? Like, was it easy for you to get into that mindset?
Yes. Yes. It was a lot of, I mean, most of like the basic ideas of you don't have to live one kind of life. You can change what you do. You can go do something else. And maybe you find a community of people that exists that you didn't know was there or that you even needed, and that it completes your life in a way that you hadn't expected. And just that you're not too old to do different things. And then you can have a fundamentally different life. That was all really resonant stuff for me. Obviously, I've had different jobs. I made video games for 20 plus years, and I was good at it. And that was, after you've done things for a long time, they feel like they're inevitable.
Yeah.
Like, I've already devoted this, the sunk cost fallacy almost. I've devoted this much energy in my life to doing this thing. I guess I'm just always going to do it. I can't be anything else. I've already sunk in all that time. But at some point, after I started doing audiobook narration, I just discovered it was like I had Stockholm syndrome or something. Like, why am I sticking around for this? I'm not happy doing this. The industry is brutal. The community is kind of really transient, and
A little toxic.
It's like if you're a white dude between the ages of 18 and 45, there's an awful lot of you, but there's not a lot of anybody else, and it really does color your experience living that way. Anyway, I don't want to go on too long about it, but I ended up obviously changing careers. I started doing audiobooks, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And I switched, and it was just like a revelation to me, just the idea that I could even do that. And so that was pretty resonant for me. And going along with kind of the found family elements that exist in the book, that was all stuff that just sort of came about for me too. I was just being exposed to a much more diverse community of people and discovering that they were all just kind. And it was just really, it meant a lot to me. So that all bled in there.
Wow, that's really, really inspiring to hear. I mean, you really did fall into, like, the book community as a whole is
good people. It's amazing people.
I feel like the whole community is always looking to improve itself and think of ways like, how can we be more inclusive, and how can we push more boundaries, and it's like nothing's off the table, but also like, don't be an ass.
Yeah, book people are good people.
And video games are
This is a different, that's like slowly immersing yourself in acid. It's very, very different than book people.
Yeah.
I mean, people talk about in books and audiobooks, oh, don't read the reviews or whatever. And I'm like, I've got asbestos skin at this point after 2 decades listening to people who play video games tell me how much they hate me or what I did. And, books are nothing. The kind of criticism you get from book people is so, it feels almost a little cute to me. It's like, this is actually kind of nice.
Well, yeah. And I feel like a lot of, you can dig through and find 1-star reviews for things where people are absolutely trashing stuff. But I feel like the criticism is usually kind of like, I wish this had been better, or I wish this had been longer, or I didn't like this character because of this. And it's usually fairly constructive almost, and not necessarily in a way that you would like have to agree and change what you're doing. But if you go on a YouTube channel that talks about video games and look at the comments in there, like, they're really brutal.
Your skin might be abraded just from reading it. Yeah, it's a different thing. And there are a lot of really amazing people in the game community. And I mean, there's so many people gaming right now. Obviously, there's tons of good people. There's tons of wonderful people, both making games and playing games. And it's got a higher level of whatever spice that is.
It's a spice.
It's got too much of it. I think some of it is the fact that people think of games as a live service, something they can influence. Right? Like, if they don't like the game, well, we'll petition you to change it. People patch games, they change, they come out, and they're not expected to be static. So there's an element of, you can respond to my problems with this and make it more for me. But not a lot of people come into a book and expect you to release a new edition catering to their particular whims. So, like, there's a different objective to the commentary, I think, because movies and books feel more static, which is cool and powerful. It just opens the door to a different kind of like, I don't know, ownership or feeling of like what you're owed as the person who plays it.
Yeah.
Like that adaptiveness should fully cater to you. It's like there's like a layer that's stripped away there. I don't know.
Video games are a weird one because it's like I mean personally, like I still look at it as like art. It's a piece of art, and people have worked together on it, and whether or not it is a live service when they could readily change it or not, it's like I don't know, I just never really felt the itch to be like that demanding of it. And I've played some really bad games and been like really disappointed by things that I was really excited about.
Sure.
But there's a lot more going into making that game than just what my expectations are of it.
Yeah, and they're just so hard to make.
Right.
I mean, they're not as hard as they used to be. Now we have so much technology that takes a lot of the technical limitations away. But making a good game is hard.
Yeah.
Especially, and making one that stands out anymore is even harder because, again, it's not like, wow, these people are smart enough to put a triangle on the screen. I mean, all of the old technical hurdles have mostly been taken away by Unity and Unreal and whatever. And now it's just all about, can you make a game that's fun? And can you make a game that stands out from other games? I mean, when Doom came out, just the fact that it would even function at all was like a miracle, that this game was good and did things that nobody else was doing. Obviously, it stands alone, but it's very hard to do something that somebody else isn't doing anymore or doesn't have the technical capability to do.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm a really huge fan of From Software games.
Oh yeah.
So Elden Ring comes out. I took time off of work. I didn't. You can ask people in my community. Like I didn't post anything for like a week. I didn't write anything. I didn't read anything. I didn't do anything. I just played that game for like 12 hours a day for like 5 days, and I loved it. It's a fantastic 9 out of 10 game.
It's an incredible game.
But it's funny that you mentioned what you just did because Breath of the Wild came out 5 years ago, and I feel like they were touching on it. Like and they just, it's not Breath of the Wild, and it doesn't.
No, but it's got a lot of similar. There's like a lot of similar like design ethos underneath it of like how that world is constructed and how you navigate it and how the world design leads you through it. There's all kinds of lessons that they clearly like learned from Breath of the Wild. I mean, you're never going to mistake the games for each other, but you can feel like that shared DNA.
And it's almost like it was funny to me seeing the reaction by the community and as a whole, and just saying like, this is one of the best video games ever made. This is so incredible. And in the back of my mind, I was just kind of like, yeah, but I feel like they did this like 5 years ago.
When they were also saying this is one of the best video games ever made. These are at least, the challenge of making something of that scale that's of good quality is still a huge challenge. It's like Red Dead Redemption 2 was just like, when that game came out, honestly, if I look at that thing, I'm like, how in the hell did they even make this?
It's 1,000 people.
The scope, the amount of stuff, and the baseline level of quality is just unbelievable. So when people make these big games that actually hang together, it's always pretty impressive.
Yeah, I feel like it'd be really fun to work for a studio like that and be a part of that team and like realize this vision and create that thing. And then also, how incredibly stressful must that be?
Oh yeah.
I mean, how many people were on a team that when you were making games?
So I was mostly small team games. So the biggest ever was like maybe 30, 31
Still a crew.
on Torchlight 2. But then I got tired of running a studio of that size, and I went back down to like 2 people and then 5, and so. But I've never worked on these kind of like Ubisoft, Nintendo scale of game where it's like hundreds and hundreds of people, probably on multiple continents,
coordinating,
making these vast things, because that's a whole other deal. I think at the end of it, everybody's tired when you ship a game because it's always hard. There's just so many things that can go wrong. And when you're making a game, it's not like anything else. You're solving problems you've never solved before, probably, and you're just guessing how long it will take. And you're just constantly refining your best guess. And because nobody who's made Elden Ring ever made Elden Ring before.
Right.
Nobody who made Breath of the Wild made Breath of the Wild before. They only have other things to relate it to, and those things are different. So you're always guessing. You crawl across the finish line and then And then everybody tells you what's wrong with it the moment it releases. Oh, there's this bug and it crashed and my save was deleted. Blah! And now you're at your lowest and you need to resolve that as quickly as possible.
That must have been really, really cool for you going from working in that kind of like a team sports kind of capacity, right? Where you're kind of relying on other people a lot more often, and then you kind of go into this other mode where now it's like you're recording audiobooks and now writing books, and it's much more a solo venture. I mean, I'm sure you're still working with people, but
it's a very different vibe. Yeah, it's a very different vibe. And shipping is just different. I mean, there's never like somebody calls you up with there's a bug with your audiobook. It doesn't work on my Samsung, blah, blah, blah. Can you track that down? I mean, I don't have to worry about that. That's great. If I listen to the audio, that's what the audio reasonably, less audible's weird, horrible compression is going to sound like on the other end. So, I mean, that's great. If you send out text for your book, I mean, what's in there is what you had. It's always the same thing on the other end. So that's all nice. And you get to ship more often. I mean, it takes years to make a game anymore. So, I mean, I get to release an audiobook like every week. So that's cool.
Man, that is so awesome. Yeah, you have a good voice for it.
Thanks. I never thought so growing up. I was very odd.
I've been meaning to get to Will White's Cradle series.
It's so fun. So I just want to preface this. I run through the first three, just treat the first three as one book.
Okay.
Because a lot of the charm of the Cradle series is when the full cast gets together. That's what really makes it go, and it basically never lets up once that happens. So the first books are good, but you just don't have the real experience of the books until you've assembled the main cast of characters. And then the pedal goes down and it just never lets up. It's great.
When you're doing these audiobooks, like, were you able to like meet Will White? Did you talk to him, or?
I finally met him in person last year at Dragon Con. I talked to him on the phone, and obviously by email and whatever. And he and his family are amazing. So his family basically runs Hidden Known Publishing. So it's a whole family endeavor, and they're all just the most charming, wonderful people. I love them a lot. But I didn't actually meet him in person until just this past year. He's a great guy, and I love his books. I unashamedly love them, so they're always a joy to do. He just writes really, really enjoyable characters that I like being around, that are a lot of fun. And he, as a writer, is just very economical. There's good stuff on every page, which I really appreciate. I love it when people find a way to have a meeting where somebody gives you information, but also really cool stuff is happening at the same time. It's almost like you're tricked into getting all of the boring stuff. It's not boring because it's been woven in a way that's just really, really entertaining. And it's just really cool to see that happen. I respect it a lot.
Yeah, that's like one of my favorite things in books, when there's like a scene where there's a lot of information being delivered, which is fine. But it's always kind of cool when there's like something just like 45 degrees off that's kind of also happening, even if it's somebody like playing with something. You know what I mean? There's like this thing that
it's like a magic trick. There's just this, it's just like misdirection almost. Like you almost don't notice that you're getting this information because this other thing is keeping you engaged. It's really neat.
So Legends and Lattes seems to have really, I mean, you know the situation better than I do, but it seems to have really taken off.
It certainly surprised me in every way that is possible.
Yeah, like how has that made you feel? Like what has that been like, that whole process?
It's been really nice, really great. It's easily the most positive experience I've ever had with something that I made.
Wow. Which
is doubly weird because I didn't actually intend. It's unintentional largely. I mean, I wrote the book to finish a National Novel Writing Month. And I published it really only because I work with independent authors all the time and I wanted to know the process they go through when they publish their books. So I thought I would just do it. And I don't do anything unless I'm trying to do it like it would be my job or this is the way that it should be done. But I went through the whole process, went through setting up, Kindle Direct Publishing stuff. I've got a cover commissioned. I wanted to learn how the layout was done. So I got vellum and I laid out the book. And I went through a real proper editorial process. I have a friend who is also an editor. She's an author and an editor. And we just bartered for her to do the edit on my book. And then I released it. Well, before I released it, I just posted the cover art, and then Shannon McGuire retweeted it, and then everything went nuts. So
that'll do it.
That was the start of things being very unexpected.
A good cover.
I think the cover's great. I like the cover. I think it does exactly what it is supposed to do.
And like a little side note here, it's like the cover. I'm sorry, it matters. Like
It does matter a lot.
You're not supposed to do it. It's like the age-old adage: don't judge a book by its cover. But like, I don't
People
know
do.
anybody that doesn't do that. It's so
Everybody
important.
does.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt
And I
you,
think it
but
can
like,
provide information. I think covers are cool because they can provide you context that you can't get. I mean, I love seeing characters in covers. I like something that communicates the vibe of the book to me and that reinforces the feeling that I'm already going to get. It's like, it's just nothing but a force multiplier for like my enjoyment of the book.
absolutely.
Like the Gideon the Ninth cover, Harrow the Ninth, those are just freaking metal, awesome covers that communicate the vibe of those books so amazingly well.
Yeah, I still haven't read those.
Well, when you do, those covers, that imagery will just be in your head and it's like resonant. I don't know. I think it's amazing. Anyway, I've really drifted way off where I was trying to answer. Yeah, it was really great.
I interrupted you.
I was super blown away. It's different than anything else I've ever done because this is something I wrote for me. Like I just wanted something nice. I wanted to write something nice. I read a lot of adventure fiction, which I love, but it's usually pretty fraught. We were talking about, fantasy and how it's often like these world-ending stakes. So I wanted something that wasn't that. I was joking around in my Discord, and I think I said something like, well, it'd be really cool to have like a Hallmark Channel movie in the Forgotten Realms, something that made me feel good, but also still traded on all these trappings of fantasy that I like. So that was probably the genesis of where I decided to do it. But I did it mostly for me. So the neat thing about having other people like it is like, it's something that was important to me, like a thought or a feeling or something that I struggled with or discovered or whatever matters to somebody else. It's like, it makes you feel less lonely in a way that I don't think I've ever experienced before. It's like this reaffirmation that other people share the same feelings about things that I do, which is really cool. And I've never had that with anything else I've done. When I narrate an audiobook, that's somebody else's story. That's somebody else's feelings. And I might resonate with it and I hopefully bring something to it, but it's somebody else's. Games are different. Their aim is different, right? They're to engage you in a different kind of way. And they're also super transient. I mean, make a game and 20 years from now, nobody's even gonna be able to play it. They'll get it, it'll just be obsolete or they won't care. It'll look ugly compared to what's available then. We'll all be in VR suits, whatever. But the book just is always going to be there. And the feelings are always going to be the same thing. So it's cool. It's really hard to express how cool that is. It's really cool. The fact that it's a nice book that's about people choosing to be nice is also nice because the responses I get are usually in line with that. It's people who are like, I'm responding to this because it's about being nice. So they're almost invariably really, really nice. It's just unbelievably pleasant. It's the coolest thing. I'm still just sort of staggered.
Right, I can tell. Yeah, you're still so excited, and it's really, really. I'm so happy for you. Like genuinely, it's just I really do understand that feeling of being you're a creative person, and you want to share all this stuff with people, and it feels like you're on the plateau so much, like, and that's cool that you're on a plateau, and then something spikes, and it's just like, here we go. Now we're cooking with gas. Do you feel like at all like you now have like some expectation that you need to hit for like another book, or is that like weirding you out or anything?
I do, and I'm trying not to because I didn't write the first one with any, and I know I already had another book in mind, and so now I have this period of worry like, oh well, if it doesn't feature coffee enough, nope, the main character is not an orc, and there's no coffee. Is it just going to be whatever magic it was? I've lost it. I can't find it again. I don't know. And I'm going to try and just not care. I'm just going to try and write the story about the thing I want to write about, and we'll just see how it goes. And I'm kind of relieved again that the first one was a standalone, so that if I totally fumble it, at least the other one's not ruined. It's still there.
I mean, the fumbling, like, I mean, that's the thing with it is it's like with anything else. I mean, like if you're doing it because there is something about it where you're losing yourself in it, and it's fun and it's hard work, and you're confused and frustrated for some of it, and then you're not for other parts, and you have that whole process, and it's just like, even if it was perfect, then you thought this is perfect, someone's still gonna say it's not as good as Legends and Lattes. So it's like it's a wash.
Somebody's not going to like it, and somebody maybe will like it more. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. And I'm working with a sample size of one right now. Like, I finished one book. Yeah. What do I know about writing books? My success rate is extremely low. given the previous attempts. So I'm not going to pretend like I know what I'm doing, because I don't. And I'm not going to pretend that this isn't largely like a confluence of like timing and fortune. I think I was telling somebody like a couple days ago, like all I did was accidentally hold my bucket under the right rain cloud and just
Yeah.
made sure it didn't have any holes in it. You know, I can't make it rain. I didn't do that. That's just all things I didn't control. I think that the timing was good. It's a book about something that people are kind of craving right now, in the same way people like were, oh, Ted Lasso, this makes me feel not like crap
Right.
while it's COVID. It's just this, you know, it's like accidental timing. Shannon McGuire being my fairy godmother. You know, it's the cover just happening to turn out so well. You know, all those things. I have some vague hand in that, but it's not. I can't take credit for any of that. So it's already like magic. It's already like I wasn't really responsible for it this time. So believing that I would in any way be able to be responsible for it another time is hard. I'll just try and make sure my hole doesn't have any buckets in it again.
Use the same bucket.
Hole doesn't have any bucket. I just reversed that. My bucket doesn't have any holes. Maybe it is
Just use the same bucket. Just
use the same bucket.
It's a brewery this time.
I'm just going to change some nouns in this book and put it back out. The next one is just totally different. The next one is like Murder, She Wrote in fantasy world. It's just totally different. It's not the same at all.
Oh, you're fine. People love that stuff.
Well, we'll see. I've never written a mystery before, and I don't know how much of a good mystery it'll be. And I don't know if I care. I more care about the people than like the mystery. I just want cool characters I like, and I think I like these characters. So hopefully that works out.
Do you ever read any Stephen King? I'm like a really big Stephen.
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan of Stephen King's work.
There's like this really cool thing, and I might butcher it, but I'll try to paraphrase it. But he kind of essentially said that like creating characters is like, it's like you're sitting at a bonfire alone at night in a desert, right? And it's completely black around you, completely dark, except for this one fire. And slowly people start to edge closer to the fire. And they just kind of keep getting closer and closer until you can really start distinguishing the features of those people as they come in. And then eventually they sit down right next to it and you can really see, like,
yeah.
I just thought that was such a beautiful analogy for not only characters, but just, you know, events and themes and things like that. And just, it feels like you're kind of sitting alone in the dark, you know, and
yeah.
It's a little spooky, and it's like, man, was it a good idea for me to even like come out here? do you remember like any kind of like click with Viv or any of the other characters where you felt like, here we go, there she is, we can work with this?
For me, they all were very sketchy at the start. Like I knew what the point of each character was, like the basic of their character, but they don't feel real until I started writing them. So like, even though I outlined and even though I knew who was there, I don't know, there's just all this shape that gets filled out when they're written, where they became more real. And it's when they talk to each other, when the dialogue works, when people are interacting and their personalities are obvious just from a couple of lines. That feels really good to me, because I like kind of spare dialogue that hopefully tells you who somebody is while also communicating whatever you have to communicate. And so it felt good while I was writing to have conversations just work. And I was like, oh, yep, if Cal and Viv are talking, this is exactly what it sounds like. And this, like, his vocal tick just appeared. It was just like, yep, that's your vocal tick. That's who you are. And it's obvious to me while I'm writing it. But I certainly didn't write it like in the outline. We'll have Hob who says, and is cantankerous. And, you know, his personality just seemed obvious. So it's cool to kind of like, there he is. It's cool to have just this little skeleton all of a sudden have muscle on it.
Well, Hob, when he does his kind of, he goes like, right? But then you have Viv do it.
Yeah.
And that's a really good example of kind of like, you're not doing much, but it works so well, because now it's like you get so much out of that. Like Hob's kind of rubbing off now, and Viv's kind of settling and getting more comfortable, and it's just I was able to.
It's like her sense of humor starts to be exposed to us. Like she relaxes into cracking a joke, and, you know, a gentle nudge in the ribs, like that comfort level of being around someone where you feel comfortable giving that like gentle rib about a personality trait that's obvious, and that also, you know, because you've been around them long enough to absorb it. There's just something about that.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things in books is when you've got two or more people that are a little bit at odds with each other, and then they just slowly, I could read that a million times. They just slowly start to settle in with each other and get to know each other better.
Yeah.
that dynamic is just it. Maybe I'm just a sucker for it, but it just works every single time.
I love it when people have differences and work them out like adults. And it's like competence porn. It's like these people are just capable of making their lives work.
Right.
I like when people's emotions don't have to be like teenager emotions for me to register them.
Totally.
You know, because adults aren't like that. I hope, most adults aren't like that. I'm not like that. It's not like adults don't have emotions, but they're not like, I don't know, this sort of manufactured clash. I love seeing people like work things out and figure them out like they're not idiots. And it's nice to have that happen when you can still have like drama that happens and like a reason to keep reading, but it doesn't have to be because, well, they really started out as like a super douche at the start of the book. And the whole book is about them not being a super douche. It's nice if your character arc is something else.
I wanted to ask, are there any other slice of life fantasy books? Like we talked about Terry Pratchett a little bit, but like, was there anything else that kind of inspired you? Like any other kind of styles or authors that you really admire, anything like that?
I didn't have anything particularly in mind when I wrote it, but that doesn't mean I didn't like Osmos stuff, because clearly I think there's a lot of like Discworldness in it accidentally. I certainly didn't do that intentionally, but there's that kind of like the anachronism that he often plays with. We got coffee shops. Well, he has one about, inventing the movies or the post office or whatever. I think mine was more like smaller scale and less about like big societal inventions, which his often were. And obviously my sense of humor is not the same. It doesn't have that kind of British wit.
In every line.
But some of that obvious, I think probably just appreciating that kind of storytelling clearly bled in. It probably leans more toward the Nanny Ogg side of things than Granny Weatherwax. I don't know. Right. After the fact, I started poking around because it seems clear that this stuff exists. It already exists all over the place. T. Kingfisher has some great... I love T. Kingfisher's work, and I think I end up echoing some of it probably unintentionally. I just read Nettle and Bone. It was great. And while I wouldn't like classify it as like the same genre exactly, it's got a lot of the same sort of like modern sensibilities married to like classic fairy tales or fantasy. I'm also reading I'm in the middle of Paladin's Grace right now, which is even more that to me. If I don't know if you've read Paladin's Grace, but
no, what is who is that?
It's also Ursula Vernon, T. Kingfisher. And it's about like a 40-year-old like berserker paladin whose god died, and he's kind of retired and sort of kind of given up on life, and he's at this other and he stumbles across this perfumer, and like when he's bored he knits socks. I mean, there's all of this background of like the fantasy world, and then it's about these two people and their relationship, and there's this very modern touch to the way that it's told. She has kind of like a very modern voice that just blends so nicely with this much more, arcane and, fantasy setting.
I mean, I'm kind of hoping that, and this is just me personally, I mean, I've read a decent amount of fantasy books, and what I'm kind of hoping is that books like yours and books like T. Kingfisher's and a lot of these things that are kind of cropping up, I'm hoping that we're kind of on like this slide up into a different kind of fantasy. Not that, and we touched on this on the beginning of the episode, but I do like grimdark stuff. But I feel like what I'd really like to see is kind of like this revival of that like late 80s, early 90s wave of fantasy, but with a lot of the things that we've learned from grimdark as far as like, because one of the really cool things about the anti-hero and that really dark, intense setting is that you can explore a lot characteristically with people through a lot of like shared trauma and just like awful things happening. Yeah. But it'd be really interesting to explore in that same vein, but with different themes now. Like maybe and I think that it's really cool that you did that. Like I really, really do. I mean, like it doesn't all have to be like she was an assassin and a damn good one. I'll read that a million times, but it's like, let's.
But yeah, and I think you're really right about the observation about grimdark often being about something a lot of the time. It's about like this very elemental things about people.
Of course.
A lot of the times, like certainly Abercrombie stuff is.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, people are all kinds of things. So talking about more things that people are, then that kind of like there's just a lot more distance to like a lot of classic fantasy because it's more about the quest, it's more about the plot. You know, it's like these particulars of character are like secondary to making sure all the armies get to the right battlefield in the end, so that the sword of Hooty Fluty can be deployed against the evil whatsy butts it. So
Whatsy butts it.
you know,
Which,
I'm
don't
good
get me
at
wrong,
naming things.
listeners, I love that book. Like, I will read that book
I do too.
forever.
I do too.
But it's like,
But I got a lot of that book.
and maybe people listening would disagree with me because there's a lot of really hardcore like Wheel of Time fans that listen, but like Randall Thor, I think he had I don't know if you've read the Wheel of Time.
I read the first like 8
Okay, cool.
books.
So I think a lot of people did, but like in my opinion, like there was quite the character assassination there. Initially, it was kind of like he was so reluctant. You know, it's like, you know, your classic reluctant protagonist, and it's like I wish that the story had been kind of like filed down and like a little more focused on characters like Rand or like Matt, where it's like you do see a lot of the things about their characters shine through, but the book isn't. It kind of, the series stops being about them almost, in my opinion.
Yeah, because it's so big.
Yeah.
There's so many threads to deal with.
And the world is ending. Like, how can Rand's struggle with like whatever he's doing really compare to like literal Satan, like like taking over the world?
I feel like Sanderson does a really good job of taking kind of the huge scale of like the Wheel of Time kind of approach, but also keeping the characters like a little bit more front and center. And I don't know if that's just because the characters themselves are stronger or just the amount of time we spend with them or how they're bouncing off each other, but I feel like he surfaces that better, that like he learned a lot from that. And
I think with I mean, did you read any of the Stormlight books?
yeah, I'm all caught up.
Okay, so like with Stormlight, he did a really creative. He wasn't the first person to think about this, but like he did a creative thing in that he kind of centers each book around a character. Like that was a really good idea. So it's like, you know, you're seeing these POV chapters from different characters that you like, but then it's like this hard, specific Shallan chapter.
This is the Shallan book. This is the
Yeah, and that is I think that lends a lot to just how fleshed out everything is, because it's like you go back and you now going forward and reading this chapter in the Shattered Plains, now you know more about Dalinar. And then you can put it into the context of everything that's going on now. Instead of like with books like The Wheel of Time, it's like you're kind of just following these people around.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, Wheel of Time.
There's a difference in like the distance of the narration. Like I feel like Brandon's like really modern voice gets you really close to the characters, you know, and he has his prose really gets out of the way and lets you get really close. And I think it's that modern kind of approach just makes it easier to relate to them, like really immediately, whereas a lot of fantasy and Wheel of Time is a little more distant. It's more like the dude by the fire, you know, telling you the story. There's a certain amount of like distance and also like putting on like the trappings of like, you know, making this fantasy feel kind of regal. I don't know.
I know
it's
exactly
just like this,
what you mean.
there's this more like, I don't want to say cultured, but there's a little bit more of a forced tone to it, which I think again puts this distance. These people are long ago and far away instead of like right now.
Right. And I think Wheel of Time is probably one of the last like really big like Western European kind of like horses and swords and knights and I think that like maybe the last kind of like holdout on that was probably Game of Thrones. And I think that it's just kind of like, you know, it's probably we're probably good on that, right? Like I mean, like I'll still read it, but like I just got done reading Fonda Lee's Greenbone saga.
I heard that was good. I haven't read it yet.
There's like planes and phones and oh man, it is epic. It is so good. And it's just like a really good example
I'll add
of
that to my incredibly tall TBR.
But it's such a good example of like the different directions we can really go with this. There's a magic system, but there's also cars. You know, there's really cool fighting and weapons and all this stuff, but it's like they're getting on planes and having business meetings. So yeah, like that kind of expansion is really, really nice. And it's like, you know, you've got like books like yours that, you know, they're bringing, I feel like you're bringing back a lot of trends that were very apparent. And like, you know, you got like Forgotten Realms type stuff and all that stuff is so great. And then having those more modern kind of like character focused, more grounded approaches to how to tell the story. I'm a huge fan. It's awesome.
I like having, I don't think anything's not improved by adding like a little magic and supernatural stuff and cool fantasy stuff. I like that stuff. It's like I don't want to read stories about sad people having affairs. It's just not like the adult fiction that I want to read. I want to read about real human things that matter to me, but I'm really not ready to give up, like dragons and shit. So I want both.
You have dragons cheating on dragons?
Yeah, sad dragons going to college and cheating with their interns. It'll win all the awards.
Pulitzer. the Pulitzer. I have like one kind of last question, and we can kind of start wrapping. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
I didn't want to take up too much of your time.
I'll take up all the time you want.
Cool.
I love doing this. So you ask as many questions and we can talk as much as you want because this is a blast.
Awesome. What video games are you playing right now, if any, if you have time for them?
So I have on deck Horizon and Elden Ring, and unfortunately they came out at nearly exactly the same time. So I was playing Horizon and then I switched to Elden Ring. I'm only picking at it right now. I just haven't had a ton of time lately, and I'm just praying for I get a couple days to rub together where I can play it a lot. My eldest kid has been playing in my stead and just kicking the crap out of it. So that's what's on deck for me. And then, when Breath of the Wild 2 comes out, everything else can just go to the back of the line.
Yeah, poor Horizon, poor Guerrilla Games.
I know, because it seems like it's an incredibly well-made game.
They had the release date locked down, and Elden Ring was supposed to come out in I think October or November 2021, and
they got delayed.
And that happened with Breath of the Wild too, actually, because Horizon came out right around the same time as Breath of the Wild.
Poor people.
And those are great.
And all the work that was put into that game, it's so well made.
They're incredible. Like, I mean, I've only played the first one, but like my birthday is coming up in like a week, and I'm going to England for like a week, like right around then. But I do have like this like 3-day span where I think I'm just gonna buy Horizon Forbidden West and just turn everything off and play it.
Just like dive in.
Yeah, because it looks really
it's super cool, and they did a really great job of like getting you back to it without going through all of the preamble again. Mm-hmm. They really kind of condensed that, so you get to get going pretty fast. So
I'm on like my 7th playthrough of Breath of the Wild right now.
I did. So I think I did 2 real playthroughs. Yeah. But my second one was with the. I was trying to do it with the expansion where they had the higher difficulty mode, whose name I forget is escaping me at this moment. Something. But yeah, I was doing the master mode, which is a little slower crawl through, at least for me.
Did you ever play Hollow Knight?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. I didn't finish it though.
It's really hard.
I feel like I got like maybe halfway through. And I like the Super Metroid, Metroidvania archetype of game a lot. I mean, Super Metroid is still the best, but Hollow Knight was good.
Yeah, those Metroidvanias. I think that's why I like the Souls games so much. So they're like 3D Metroidvanias, kind of.
Yeah, they have a lot of those elements. Oh, I can't get there right now, but I will be able to later for various reasons. And you can just see so much of the world that you can't quite get at yet, but then you do, and it's very satisfying. Yeah,
I kind of preferred. I will concede that Elden Ring is a better game, but I think Dark Souls 3 is still my favorite.
The only Soul. So I've played all of the Souls games, but the only one I have finished was Demon Souls, the remake.
Really?
Because the remake,
heard it's good.
There's something to be said for having your loading times literally be only like 2 seconds when you die.
Right.
Because the sting of screwing up is lessened an awful lot. Also, running at a solid 60 frames per second all the time goes a long way to making you never be mad that you fell off the edge of like a big, annoying elevator because you felt like the frame rate was too low.
Oh my God. Speaking of frame rates, I have like a decent like MacBook that I use for everything, but I don't have a PC. I use an Xbox Series S, and I have my Switch and my PS4. My brother really wanted to play Divinity 2 Original Sin, or Divinity Original Sin 2 or whatever. So I went on Steam on my MacBook because apparently that's a thing, and I bought it. It was like on sale. It was like $18. I was so excited about it. Apparently, like MacBooks just can't do it. Like they just like, oh my God,
just chunking
oh my
along.
God, it was so bad. It was like somebody tried to make a 3D game in like 1991 on like an old, and I was just, So now I've kind of like, because we played about half an hour of it, and I could tell immediately that it was exactly the kind of game I wanted to play. And now I kind of want to spend like $700 on it.
Well, I know there's a console version of Divinity's Original Sin
Yeah,
2
but
also, but I can't remember if it was for
I have it
Xbox
on my
Series S.
PS4. I bought it like a long time ago. And
But it seems like it would be kind of
as
annoying,
soon as
but
I started it, I was like, "Oh, I have to play this with a mouse and keyboard."
must play with
Yeah,
mouse.
it's. Ugh. I have a couple more here for you. You might not like this one. I didn't write it in.
No, do
um,
it.
do you have any advice for? This is kind of a two-parter. Do you have any advice for people that are trying to get into narrating audiobooks?
Um, it's a really great industry with really nice people, and I love it. So I always encourage people who are interested in to look at it. You got to want to sit in one spot for hours reading out loud, and you can kind of test this out yourself just by going into a room somewhere and reading out loud for 2 hours. And if you hate it by the end of it, you probably should not be a narrator. And then you save yourself any investment in money.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
There's two sides to it. There's a technical side, and then there's like a performance side. And the performance side is the most important one. Technical stuff you can resolve. The most important thing is that you can read a book and get what the author's going for and deliver that in a way that's relatable to who's listening. And for most people, that involves some kind of coaching when they're first starting out. And there is a really friendly audiobook community. There's Facebook groups for it. You can get training and find out what you need to know, like what you don't know that you need to know. Really quick resources. There is a site called narratorsroadmap.com that has a ton of freely available resources and is reasonably easy to remember. Most people who are starting out are going through acx.com, which is a service that's run by Amazon Audible that allows independent authors and small publishers to put up books for audition. And you can just audition for them. And if you win the audition, then you can get your book published. You can take on the work and do it and be paid for it. But there's a lot of competition because there are established narrators doing that work. So coaching and getting better is a large part of that. There's a lot more than just having a nice voice. There's all kinds. I could talk for hours about the particulars of audiobook narration. There's a ton to learn, but I think it's an amazing industry and it's an amazing job. And I would never want to warn anybody away from it if it was something that they wanted to do. But those are good places to start to get info. Or you can just hit me up. Like I say, people in audiobooks are really friendly. We'll just answer questions.
And on top of that, I know we discussed this, and you know, like what do you know? But do you have any advice for budding writers out there?
I wrote up a giant Medium article where I went through everything I went through to write this because I'm just that kind of nerd. And I can probably point you to that. It's somewhere buried on my Twitter. But things that worked for me, which I don't know if will work for anybody else. One, I outlined because I was a pantser before. So if you have been trying to write a book by the seat of your pants and it's not working, maybe just try something else. I know outlining doesn't work for lots of people, but it worked for me. So, if something isn't working, try something else. I think one of the things that helped me get to the end of writing my first book was that I finally picked something simple and relatable. I've told this before, but people, when I was making video games, would come and they'd be like, I'm going to make a video game and it's going to be World of Warcraft and GTA and it's going to have the conversation system from Mass Effect and it's got 100 different endings and whatever. And they were always very, very ambitious. And I'm like, you know what you should do? You should make Tetris.
Right.
And I finally took that advice myself. And so this is my Tetris. It's something simple that I could think all the way to the end of. I could keep it all in my brain. I understood how it worked and I could just write it. And all my previous attempts, I was like, well, this is just not going to be the best novel ever. And have 8 POVs. Is it even fantasy? And finally, I just made something simple. And that was the right thing to do because simple things can be just as successful as complicated things. Sometimes maybe more so. Look at Tetris. I mean, anybody can make Tetris. The important thing was that Alexei Pajitnov made it first. So pick something simple. And the other was writing on a schedule. Nano was really helpful for that. I had a writing buddy, which was extremely helpful. So both of us just kept each other on our word counts. We just, encouraged and made sure that the other person got their words for the day. And we both finished. So that was super useful for me. Once you do write it, edit it. Get somebody to edit it. If you're going to, because you learn so much just from the act of editing.
When you did this project for NaNoWriMo, did you, because how many words did it end up being?
62K. and then I edited out 62K, and then I edited out 2K and added back 2K. So it ended up basically exactly where it started. And then I did a really long edit process. We pulled out, redundant stuff, tuned sentences down. And then I added a few expanded scenes and conversations just to make sure some characters stayed present through the middle. And a few conversations that were more like quiet, got a little bit of elaboration, and that kind of put back all the words.
Man, NaNoWriMo is so cool.
It is cool.
I've done it 2 years now, and the encouragement from everybody doing it is incredible.
It is. I think it's cool that you can get something out of it. You can have a book out of it. It's not like there's nothing wrong with the book that you get out of it. It's not like it's like the JV, but it's just a chance to write a book. It's super cool.
Yeah, and I mean there is something to be said about, getting to the end. Like writing, even if that last sentence is going to disappear in a few months and it's like pretty bad, and like going back and read, like there's something to be said about getting to the end of that and knowing, like if someone sat down and read this, it might make a little bit of sense.
Yeah, somebody might get something out of this. Somebody might appreciate that this existed. I think there's just, you learn all kinds of cool things by editing. I did a really slow edit. Mm-hmm. My editor and I did a chapter a day. And I started paying attention to the kinds of things we were editing, and then I would like pre-edit a chapter. I just wanted to like internalize all the editing lessons that were being learned. So slowly over the course of the book, I learned all kinds of cool things during the edit process. It was really neat.
Was this a NaNoWriMo 2020 thing?
It was just this last year, so it's been, 6 months?
Wow. Oh my God.
Or is it 5 months? I don't know what it is. I don't know what month it is. Yeah, I wrote it in November, yeah.
Wow.
And then the edit was through part of December and into January. And I commissioned the cover art in December, and then it got started in January and happened early January.
Wow.
So it was a very, very short period of time. It will have taken longer for me to go through the contract stuff with Tor than it will have to have written and released the book.
That must have been, Tor contacted you, correct?
They didn't, the agents contact. I had like 3 agents contact me, which I was surprised by. And then they went out. The agent that I picked, Stevie Finnegan with Xeno in the UK, they went out and shopped it. And then Tor UK came back like really fast. And yeah, it was all very, I was like,
That's so
I didn't know if
wild.
I was going to do, I certainly would never have considered doing anything like that.
Yeah.
So it was just, and then when the time came, I was like, well, I kind of just put the book out anyway, I guess. Why not? I'll just see how it works.
Are they trying to do a different cover or anything like that?
I'm willing to bet you in the UK will be a different cover, because UK cover sensibilities are just so different. They wouldn't be caught dead with an illustrated thing. It's just not classy enough.
I'm going to England in a couple weeks, and I'm bringing an entire empty suitcase with me because I want to
just to pick up. UK
there's
editions.
some really cool UK editions.
There are
really
some cool editions.
Yeah, but some of them look bad. But I'm sure they think some of ours look bad.
I've seen some I don't like the Stormlight UK editions at all. Yeah, if you look them up, it's hard to do, and when you're competing with Michael Whalen, it's tough anyway. But in this case, it's like you didn't even try. In the U.S., the cover is going to be mostly the same. I think the typography will be different, but the artwork will be the same. And I think I have convinced them in the UK to include the original artwork inside. It'll probably be grayscale, on a page at the front.
Yeah.
So the outside looks different, but at least you can kind of see the characters if you want, without offending anyone in the aisles of, Waterstones or whatever.
This is way off the rails, but I'm just curious. What's your astrological sign?
Aries.
Cool. I don't even know what that means. I don't know. Maybe I'll make that a practice with everyone I interview.
Just figure out what the astrological sign is.
What's
your sign, baby?
I know, right? Yeah, that's one of the questions you ask. I have one last question, and this kind of came up just randomly while I was typing these out, but I thought it was kind of cool. So, and you can take as long as you need on this.
Okay.
There are 3 zombies right outside your door, the one directly behind you. Your only usable weapon is the object immediately to your left. What chance do you have of surviving on a scale of 1 to 10? And before you answer, these are 28 days later zombies, not Dawn of the Dead zombies.
Unless they are distracted by glowy lights, it's a little miniature keyboard, which I use for audio editing.
Oh,
and
you're
it probably isn't going to do me any
screwed.
good. Unless this handle counts as an object to my left and I can go like
Rip
this.
it off.
Yeah, I'm pretty much doomed.
Oh man.
I think it's a zero. I think it's a solid zero. There is nowhere to go
Yeah,
in
you're
here.
trapped.
There are no other exits.
You know, it's funny. Zombies are so played, but like I just thought of that like randomly. I was just like,
I was watching Love and Robots last night because the new season
right.
came out, and it was like the miniature zombie invasion. So it's all like tilt shift camera and these teeny tiny little zombies. So it's like a whole zombie invasion end to end with little squeaky voices and like sped up with little miniature zombies.
Oh my god, that's so cool.
It's-
I still haven't watched it. Oh my god, like my co-host and I have like this weird back and forth because he watches a lot of TV and I like barely ever squeeze it in. Like, and he's just like constantly bringing stuff up, and I don't even.
I watch only a few things.
It's hard.
Like I will watch. I'm my tolerance level for my bar for what I'll spend time watching is really high now. Like it has to be really, really entertaining or singular. Like I watch Better Call Saul because I think it's amazing. And I watched Moon Knight. It was cool. I liked it.
I don't even know what
Giant
that is.
Hippo Lady was pretty awesome. It was the Disney thing with Oscar Isaac.
Oh, cool.
The Marvel character Moon Knight. It's all the Egyptian mythology and stuff. Anyway, I liked it.
Do you find that you end up watching a lot of the same stuff that like your kids want to watch, or like
No, they want to watch Dragon Ball Z all the
Woo!
time, and well, I can appreciate sometimes some Dragon Ball Z. Mostly, they sound like they're trying to take a poop all the time, and I can't stop laughing.
I'm still. Our listeners will know I've been chipping away at that show Attack on Titan.
Oh yeah. I think I've watched the first 4 or 5 episodes. I was not in the mental state of mind to endure Attack on Titan over the past year. I have to wait until I'm just like, the world is just more cheerful or something. I don't know.
It's just
It feels brutal.
so much, and it's like it's like a gorgeous, amazing show. Like I have never watched anything quite like it. Like just the music and the art style, and like everything's all shiny. You know, like the sky for some reason is like really shiny. But yeah, there's just like parts of that show where like I feel like I'm having a panic attack. Like I feel like it's just like, why did you make this?
Yeah, I can't do it right now. I can't do it right now. I know that being, the past couple of years have definitely shaped the kind of stuff I could endure watching.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, like I catch myself sometimes just like doom scrolling a little bit, and then I'm like, okay, I need to watch like the Great British Baking Show or something.
Exactly. That was one of the things I was thinking about with this book: the Great British Baking Show and Fixer Upper.
Wow. Oh yeah, because the first like third of the book is
it's like a little bit of building montage, right?
Totally.
There's just something satisfying about you have the crappy thing and now you have the good thing. It's just like this weird little dopamine hit. It's nice. It's nice.
It's like playing
Same thing
Animal
with the British
Crossing.
Baking Show. Like, oh, that looks really cool. I want to eat that.
Dude, the magic the magical chokehold, the British chokehold that show has over me. Like,
and it's weird. Any other country tries to make that show, I'm like,
nope.
No, I don't like the Canadian one. I don't care about anybody else's but the Great British Baking Show.
It's like if like someone from like New Mexico tried to write like Harry Potter. It's just like you know what I mean? Like Harry grew up in a cupboard and it totally sucked, and like I just feel like this wouldn't
just
have
not
it.
the same.
Just wouldn't have that touch to it. I know. Like, I wanted to ask you this too. Actually, do you have any audiobook narrators that you really love that you think do like an exemplary job?
There's a lot of really good ones. My all-time favorite is Frank Muller, who sadly passed away a long time ago. He used to do all Stephen King stuff.
Oh yeah,
I love Frank Muller.
Really good.
He's like The Green Mile, like my favorite audiobook of all time.
Incredible.
George Goodell's really great.
He did the Gunslinger before Frank Muller did.
No, he did it after.
What was it?
Because
you're right.
Stephen rewrote parts of The Gunslinger, so they had to re-record it. So there is a Frank Muller version of The Gunslinger out there, probably on cassette tape.
Woo.
Bonnie Turpin, Julia Whalen. God, there's just so many good. I'm gonna miss people, and I'm gonna feel terrible because there's just
on the spot.
There's a lot of really good narrators. Everybody loves Scott Brick. There's anyway, there's a lot of great ones. Jim Dale.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I am a Jim Dale Harry Potter listener.
Oh, I'm Stephen Fry.
I think Stephen
all the way.
Fry's voice is amazing, but I prefer Jim Dale's character work.
I don't like the way he says. I don't like the way that Jim Dale has Hermione say Harry.
Harry.
Heavy.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but I can hear it in my brain. My wife used to have a lot of problems sleeping, and she could only go to sleep if we were listening to Harry Potter on CD. So, like the entire series, I've listened to it unbelievable number of times, like subliminally. It's
right
just seared into my cerebral cortex at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, no shade on Stephen Fry. His voice is amazing, and he loves language, and you can tell every time he says something. But I prefer Jim's characterizations, especially for Hagrid.
I think one of my favorites right now is like Stephen Pacey.
Stephen Pacey's fabulous. I should have said him. Stephen Pacey's amazing.
Nobody could do Joe Abercrombie's stuff like Stephen Pacey.
Stephen Pacey is chef's kiss.
I seem to kind of, I feel like personally I gravitate more towards the British ones because it's got like that extra kind of like zhuzh. I don't know what it is.
Well, British people make things sound good.
They do.
They make things sound good. And a lot of fantasy really lends itself to it with the language that's used.
Would it be frowned upon for you to fake a British accent for an entire?
I mean, I fake a British accent all the time for dialogue.
Right. Yeah.
So I've had a case where someone wanted me to read a first-person book that was clearly written with a British person in mind, and I'm not British. And I was like, we should just really have a good British actor do that, because I could do it, but it's like you're stretching a little further. And if there's a good British narrator to do it, why wouldn't you just do that?
No, we have to have Travis Baldree.
It makes sense for me to do British accents for people who are talking, because books aren't about just one person. They're about a whole bunch of characters. They've got all kinds of accents. So that's not even weird. Yeah. It's only weird when it's first person, and all of the narrative needs to also be delivered in the same dialect.
How do you choose what to make someone's voice sound like? Does the author have any input on that or anything, or is that all you?
I mean, it depends. Some authors like to have input. Some authors have like actors in mind. I mean, a lot of the things about it are ideally you're getting right out of the text. I mean, if somebody says I and arse, you probably know a lot of things about what kind of dialect they're using, and it's just built into their language. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it'll just be mentioned. That happens more often if it's like contemporary and you're saying where somebody's from. But usually there's lots of clues there. Some authors don't even know what their characters sound like. Some have like a really strong idea of this guy is played by Robert Downey Jr. in the movie adaptation, and they know, and I love to have that information if I can get it.
Yeah.
But mostly it's also, how do I partition out these characters so that they play well together when you're hearing them? Like, right. Everybody can't sound the same. If you've got multiple people who are snarky, witty characters, they probably all shouldn't have the same accent unless they really must for reasons of narrative or whatever. You've got to partition them out in some way, especially in fantasy where you've got like more room to play.
I feel like it'd be difficult if there was like some like other creature of some sort, right? Like have you had to do that where you're not?
Oh yeah,
I
do lots of creatures. Okay. I do lots of creatures. One of the best characters in Cradle is like a 2-ton turtle that's on fire named Orthos, and he's amazing. He's the best. I love doing Orthos. He's so good. I do a lot of dragons and beasts and whatever.
We're gonna have to hear Orthos now.
All right.
Orthos is extremely low down and gravelly.
And what did he say?
So good.
The dragon advances.
He says things like that. Anyway, He's fabulous, and he's also funny.
Do you find it hard to kind of like keep consistent on that? Like, you know what I mean? Like to remember what everyone sounds like over 10 books? Like, that's a lot.
I mean, I keep voice samples of everybody.
Oh.
Because you do forget after a while, unless they're really singular. I will never forget Ortho. Some of them are just like burned into your brain. And in Shadeslinger, which you mentioned like earlier, there's a talking axe named Frank, who I will also never forget. Frank is amazing. He's like easily the best banter character I've ever read in my life. He's just so fun to read. He's just funny as hell.
That made me think of did you ever read Dresden Files?
The first like 3.
Yeah, like James Marsters does the audiobooks for them. He does an amazing job for those.
And he's had like a long journey on those because we've been doing them for a while.
Like 16 books or something.
Yeah.
They keep getting longer. All right, I think that's going to do it. I think we're going to wrap that up. I shot a lot of questions your way that I didn't write down and send to you yesterday, and lots of credit for you answering those and me putting you on the spot with naming some of your peers. Sorry.
I named enough and I qualified it enough that I won't feel too bad.
Totally. Right. But yeah, everybody that's been here for the ride, thank you so much for listening and being a part of this awesome episode. It's just been such a joy to talk to you and such a pleasure to read your book. I'm really looking forward to, whatever else you've got coming out. I will plug it to the masses to the best of my ability.
Thanks so much for having me on. It was really great. I had a blast.
Hell yeah, and we'll have you on again.
Yes, please.
Travis, thank you so much, and to everybody else out there, happy reading.